Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press on day 17 of the trial. A name emerged that no one expected. George Clooney, the acclaimed actor and global humanitarian, stepped into the courtroom not to discuss Hollywood or politics, but to reveal a world hidden beneath the surface of fame. Clooney's testimony detailed a shocking underground network, a secret cave beneath a world-famous theme park, disturbing parties involving people called nuggets, and a culture of fear and silence that kept the elite in line. Clooney claimed he never participated in the rituals, but stayed silent out of fear of losing everything. What he shared left the courtroom paralyzed in disbelief, and might just change how the world views fame forever. The courtroom was still, the air heavy with tension. When the judge called the next witness, most expected another music executive, maybe a lesser-known figure tied to Diddy's past. No one anticipated what happened next. As the doors opened, a murmur rolled through the gallery. Standing in the doorway, dressed in a dark suit, his face solemn, was George Clooney. Even the stenographer's fingers hesitated for a beat. George Clooney, Hollywood royalty, humanitarian icon, and global spokesperson for justice, was here to testify against Sean Diddy Combs. Clooney took the stand, slowly refusing to make eye contact with Diddy. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. "I never imagined I'd be here," he began, voice low but firm. "But there are things I've seen, things I can't carry anymore." He explained that he had been invited into Diddy's social circle over a decade ago, first at parties, then on private retreats, and eventually through cryptic after-hours invitations. At first it felt like being inducted into some secret fraternity. It was flattering, mysterious. You get invited to places most people don't even know exist. And when Diddy invites you, you show up. That's how it works in our world. Clooney said the tone changed around 2013, when he received an envelope. No return address inside was a single note card. No words, just GPS coordinates and a time 200 a.m. He said he thought it was a prank at first, but then received a text from an unknown number. Follow the coordinates. Wear black, no phone. Curiosity outweighed caution. He followed the instructions. "I was driven in a black SUV through side streets and industrial zones. Eventually we stopped in the parking structure of a major theme park, one I can't name, but millions of families visited every year." He paused, looking at the jury. "That was the first time I entered the cave. And I've never looked at Hollywood the same way since. In that moment, the courtroom wasn't just listening, it was holding its breath. The image of George Clooney alone, in a theme park at 2 a.m., about to step into something darker than any movie script, was surreal, and it was only the beginning." George Clooney's voice dropped lower as he leaned toward the microphone, his eyes fixed straight ahead. "What I saw underneath that theme park," he said, slowly, was not a party. It wasn't a gathering. It was something else entirely. Something designed. The courtroom was silent, transfixed. He described being escorted through an unmarked service door near a staff-only loading bay, down a winding concrete corridor lit by flickering fluorescent lights. They passed several security checkpoints, each guarded by men who didn't speak. They weren't bodyguards. Clooney noted they were something else, cold, efficient, and they knew who I was without ever asking. Eventually they reached what looked like a reinforced metal hatch. It hissed open beyond it, a massive underground chamber carved into the earth. Clooney described soft ambient lighting music that pulsed like a heartbeat, and dozens of individuals, celebrities, politicians, athletes, mingling in luxury robes, sipping out of gold-plated cups. But one thing stood out immediately. There were people there with no arms, no legs. Clooney said quietly. Some were wheeled in, some sat on pillows. They were referred to as nuggets. That was the term everyone used casually, like it was nothing. He paused, his eyes narrowing. I couldn't believe it. These weren't just spectators. They were part of it. The centerpiece. He admitted that he didn't understand. At first, I asked someone what the hell was going on. They laughed and said, "Don't worry." They volunteered. It's part of the fun. But it didn't feel fun. It felt wrong. Clooney said that before anyone was allowed deeper into the chamber, they had to sign an NDA, a thick one enforced by a security firm. He later recognized as a private intelligence group. If you didn't sign, you didn't go in. That's how they got everyone. He refused. But instead of being kicked out, he was escorted to a side lounge. I watched from a glass wall. What I saw still wakes me up at night. People I once respected behaving like animals. And those nuggets, they weren't just accessories. They were being passed around, paraded like props. The judge asked if Clooney had ever participated. His answer was firm. No, not once. I stayed in that lounge. I drank my whiskey. I left as soon as I could. He added, I thought it was an isolated incident, but it wasn't. There were more invitations, more caves always tied to Diddy. Clooney's hands were trembling. Now I didn't speak, because I thought silence was survival. But silence is how this stayed alive. George Clooney sat upright, his face hardening as he recounted what happened after he declined to return to the cave. I thought I was out, he said, but in Hollywood, nothing ends clean. You walk away from Diddy, and you don't just walk away from a person. You walk away from protection connections, and sometimes your entire career. He told the court that after his refusal to engage further, he started noticing things. Phone calls went unanswered. Projects that had once been green-lit were suddenly stalled. A director he'd worked with for years backed out of a major deal. Nobody said it was Diddy, but the silence was loud. Clooney said, it was like there was a cloud following me. I was still George Clooney, but there was this invisible hand pulling strings I couldn't see. What disturbed him more was what he witnessed happening to others. He described an actor, a household name who had confided in him about experiencing something similar. The actor had attended one of Diddy's cave events, stayed too long, saw too much, and spoke to the wrong person about it. A week later, the actor's name was plastered across tabloids with false accusations. Within months, their career imploded. It was too coordinated to be coincidence. Clooney said they knew how to destroy someone, not with violence, with silence, suggestion, and strategic scandal. Clooney then revealed he had kept a journal during that period, noting every suspicious cancellation, every unexplained call from unnamed PR firms urging him to distance himself from certain people. He turned those pages over to the court, but the most haunting part of this segment came when Clooney admitted the real reason he stayed close to Diddy's circle, even after what he'd seen. I was scared, he said. Not of violence, of exile in our business. Fame is oxygen. They control the air supply. He paused, then continued. There were nights. I'd be at a fundraiser, a gala, a premiere, and Diddy would show up out of nowhere. He'd hug me, smile for cameras, whisper in my ear. Still part of the family, right? And I'd nod, because saying no out loud in front of that many people, I couldn't do it. The courtroom was still. I never did what they did, but I stayed close. And that's haunted me every day. George Clooney's jaw tightened as the prosecutor asked him to elaborate on who else was present at these secret gatherings. He hesitated, glancing across the courtroom. I won't name names on this record, he said, but if this court demands it privately, I will provide the list." The judge nodded. Clooney continued. "These weren't just obscure socialites or one-time reality stars. I saw billionaires, Oscar winners, tech mogul, a couple of elected officials, people whose entire brands were built on decency and public trust, and they were all there in robes, in masks, signing NDAs, like it was routine, laughing, joking, participating." The courtroom murmured. Clooney leaned forward. What made these parties work, and what made them so dangerous, was the protection everyone gave each other. You weren't just there to indulge, you were there to be seen indulging by others. So no one ever talked, because to talk meant mutual destruction. He described being approached weeks after the cave incident by a high-level producer who casually referenced nuggets during a lunch meeting, smiling as if it were a shared inside joke. That's when I realized it wasn't a secret. Clooney said it was an institution. He revealed that many of the celebrities involved were drawn in not through threats, but through promises, the promise of eternal relevance, unbreakable networks, and access to what he called the true social pyramid of fame. The court gasped when Clooney described a guest book, an actual bound ledger he claimed to have seen on a podium near the entrance to the underground cave. Everyone who entered had to sign, he didn't, but he remembered a few of the names on the page. Above his ones, he said, would shock the average American household. "I've kept this to myself for too long," he said, visibly shaking now, "not because I was guilty, but because I didn't want to be erased." That's what happens when you speak out. You vanish. You become a headline for a week, and then your career is gone. He looked directly at the jury. "But I'm 63 years old. I've won everything I need to win. What I haven't done is tell the truth about what I saw and who was there and why it matters." Then he glanced for the first time at Diddy, and he was always in the middle, smiling, watching like a king in his cave. George Clooney's testimony took a turn as he reached into a small leather folder his legal team had brought in earlier. With trembling hands, he pulled out a sealed manila envelope and placed it gently on the witness stand. "I debated for years whether to open this," he said, "and when I finally did, it changed everything." He explained that the envelope had been slipped under his door in 2017. No name, no note, just a black wax seal stamped with the letter P. At the time, he was in Lake Co., far removed from Hollywood, trying to live a quieter life. "It was my sanctuary," he said. But the past always finds a way back. Inside the envelope were 6 glossy photographs. Clooney testified he brought them to the courtroom. Though only one had been approved for display, he described the photo, a dimly lit shot from inside the underground cave, grainy but unmistakable. A cluster of recognizable celebrities gathered around what looked like a small sunken stage. In the center of that stage was a single figure on a red pillow, a nugget, no arms, no legs, blindfolded. "The image shook me," Clooney said, voice cracking. "Not just because of what it showed, but because I recognized the man sitting closest to the nugget. It was someone I'd worked with, someone America idolized." He refused to name the man aloud, but he passed the photo to the judge under seal. Clooney continued, "This wasn't a prank. This wasn't some photoshopped smear. It was real, and whoever sent it to me wanted me to know that it was time to choose a side, silence or exposure." He said that moment was his breaking point. He contacted an attorney, prepared a sworn affidavit, and stored everything in a private vault. "I started thinking about my family," he said, "about my wife, my children, what kind of man I was if I just let this continue." Clooney testified that in the years since he had been approached twice, once at a charity gala, and once outside a film premiere, by people who handed him notes that read only, still watching. He kept them both. The prosecutor asked if he feared for his safety. Clooney nodded absolutely, but I'm more afraid of what happens if nobody talks. He looked around the courtroom again and said, "This case isn't just about one man's crimes. It's about a system built on silence, and today I'm choosing to break mine." George Clooney leaned forward, his voice growing quieter, almost conspiratorial. "I want the court to understand this wasn't just a cave, it was an operation, designed, engineered, hidden in plain sight." He explained that the entrance to the underground compound wasn't beneath some remote wilderness or obscure warehouse. It was, in his words, strategically built under a family-friendly theme park, one of the busiest in the world. Though he didn't name it, he emphasized that millions walk right past the entrance every year. It's so close to normally, it's practically mocking it. Clooney said he described what he remembered from his one trip inside a freight elevator hidden behind a maintenance tunnel. No lights, no signs. Once inside, it dropped several levels underground. Bypassing any standard security systems, he claimed the descent took nearly a full minute, during which time no one spoke. It felt like being dropped into another world, and that's exactly what it was. Clooney provided a rough layout. He sketched with his attorney a long central corridor lined with small soundproof rooms, each marked with a single symbol. At the end of the corridor sat what he called the Circle, a massive dome-shaped chamber with mirrored walls and velvet flooring where the so-called nugget parties were held. Everything about it was ritualized. He said there were rules, there were rotations. The participants never questioned it, because if you were there, you were already compromised. He explained that inside the circle there was always one rule: no names. Everyone wore masks elaborately designed, often resembling animals or distorted human faces. Some participants arrived already in robes, others changed on sight. Clooney noted that a security team of former military personnel kept watch on every room, but none of them intervened. They were part of it, he added. They kept the peace, not the law. One of the most chilling revelations was the presence of a recording booth, a glass room elevated above the circle with tinted windows and blinking red lights. "Someone was always up there," Clooney said. "We didn't know who, but we knew we were being watched, documented." The court fell silent as he ended the segment with a single sentence. "You think Hollywood makes movies about secret societies for fun? Number that's called projection." George Clooney paused, breathing slowly as he stared at his hands. "There's something I've never told anyone. Not my wife, not my lawyer, not even my closest friends." He began, "There was one night. The circle broke its own rules. He said it was a night unlike any other around 2015. An unusual invitation had been sent out. No printed NDA, just a black card with the words, 'Only the initiated,' embossed in silver. Clooney didn't plan to go, but a producer he trusted insisted he show up, claiming everything was changing. So Clooney went, and what he saw, he said, felt different from all his past visits. The energy was tense. The usual mirth was gone. Diddy arrived late, wearing all white, and flanked by two unnamed men with shaved heads and dark glasses. Clooney said he'd never seen them before, and no one spoke to them. The circle was already in motion. Masked celebrities, mingling nuggets presented on velvet cushions, soft music looping in the background. When Diddy suddenly called for silence, Clooney recounted, he stood in the center, raised a glass, and said, "Tonight, we prove who belongs." The room froze. The lights dimmed. The red booth above flickered to life. But instead of remaining silent, a distorted voice echoed through the chamber. "Begin the choosing." Clooney described what followed as the most disturbing moment of his life. A group of participants were escorted into the circle, blindfolded, trembling. Some were celebrities. He said others were unknown, one by one. They were asked questions by the voice above those who answered incorrectly or refused, were escorted out through a side door that led somewhere no one returned from. "I don't know what happened to them," Clooney admitted. "All I know is that after that night, 3 people I recognized disappeared from the public eye within weeks." He said he tried to leave midway through the night, but a guard blocked his path. Mr. Combs said, "You should stay," the man whispered. "You're on the list." "I felt like a prisoner," Clooney told the court. "And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just some twisted party. It was a loyalty test, and I passed only because I stayed still and silent." He shook his head, but my soul didn't. George Clooney adjusted his seat. His voice heavier now after that night, he said, "I made a decision I would never go back, but leaving wasn't enough, not anymore. I had to dismantle the mythology around him, around all of them." He described how the entertainment industry protects itself. It's not just contracts or NDAs, it's favors roles, press coverage, and if you're obedient, your mistakes disappear. He explained how publicists, studios, and elite PR firms ran a quiet protection racket, ensuring that Diddy's name stayed glossy, even when rumors crept too close to the truth. "I watched people try to leave his orbit," Clooney said. "They'd vanish from the headlines, shows canned music shelved. Suddenly, nobody returned their calls." Clooney recalled a moment at the Cannes Film Festival in 2016. A young actor, someone Clooney mentored, had confided in him, trembling. He said, "They tried to get me into the cave. I told them no. Now my agent won't return my calls." The actor's career, Clooney testified, evaporated within 6 months. He ended up teaching drama at a middle school in Oregon, not because he lacked talent, but because he said no to a handshake that was supposed to be silent. Clooney admitted his own complicity. "I stayed quiet for years. I accepted the protection. I nodded in the background because I was scared. Scared of being blacklisted, smeared digitally, erased. But more than that, I was scared of what I'd have to become if I stayed in." He testified that he had spent years gathering fragments of information, guest lists, invitations, photos, never posted receipts for donations to shell charities that operated near the theme park. "I kept it all, not to destroy anyone, but to protect myself." Just in case, he looked out toward the press, pit eyes locking onto the swarm of cameras. "You all know the industry's broken, but no one wanted to say it because Diddy wasn't the disease, he was the symptom. The real sickness was silence." Then softly he added, "And silence is how monsters thrive." The courtroom was still. Clooney wasn't just testifying anymore. He was confessing. George Clooney sat forward, both hands gripping the wooden edge of the witness stand, as if grounding himself. "I have one last thing to share," he said, "something that's haunted me. Since the day it arrived." He explained that in late 2019, just before the world shut down, a package appeared at his Los Angeles home. No return address, no postage stamp, just his name written in delicate cursive. That was the first red flag. He said, "Nobody knew I was back in LA. Not even my agent. Inside the package was a single item, an unmarked flash drive." Clooney testified that he brought the contents to court under seal. But what he saw alone in his study that night, he would never forget. It was surveillance footage. He said from inside the cave, the courtroom held its breath. It was grainy, time-stamped, no sound, just black and white video of that red velvet chamber, a rotating overhead camera slowly capturing the circle one by one. Masked figures stepped forward. In the center again was a nugget, motionless, framed like a centerpiece. He looked down, then continued, and then Diddy entered. Clooney described how Diddy walked slowly to the center, removed his mask, and looked directly up into the camera. as if he knew it was being recorded. He raised a glass, gave a slow smile, and whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but I could feel it. The clip ended abruptly. Clooney said there were no edits, no jump cuts, just a clean, slow document of ritual. He played it again, then again, and then he destroyed the drive. But not before I made copies. He added, because that was never meant for me. It was a threat. Clooney paused. The message was clear. We know you were there. We know you watched, and now we're watching you. He said he hired private security, moved his children out of the country for 6 months, declined major film roles. I went dark, he said, because once you say no to the circle, really say no, they don't just forget you. They remind you. The prosecutor asked if he feared retaliation. From testifying? Of course I do. Clooney replied. But I'm more afraid of what happens if we don't talk. If we all just keep playing dumb, clapping at award shows, pretending this world isn't built on blood. He took a deep breath. I may not make another movie after this. I might lose everything, but I'll finally be able to